Okay, we have people joining us. See the numbers going up. We can get started. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have attendees from across the globe. We appreciate you spending the time and joining us on today's webinar, where we will be talking about empowering CPG brands to meet sustainability goals with cutting-edge technology. So before we get started with the webinar, just wanted to run through a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to everyone that's registered within the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. And if you have any questions for us, use the question pane on your screen and add your questions throughout the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end. And we'll make sure we'll set up some time, about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of this webinar to get to your questions. And if we don't get to answer your question, we'll be sure to send you a response after this webinar and make sure that we connect with you and answer any questions that you may have added. So without further ado, I will get started. The agenda for the webinar is I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides about who Biome Makers is and what we do here. And then I'll introduce my colleague and panelist, Jacob Parnell, and we'll get into the discussions and hopefully have some good insights to share with you guys on how you can get started on your sustainability goals. And I'm going to share my screen now. And Jacob, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see it now.
Amazing. I'm just going to put it into presentation mode. Apologies, it seems like there's a bit of a delay here. Okay, fantastic. So a little bit about us at Biome Makers. We got started back in 2015 in California, and we became a global AgTech leader, where we set the standard for soil health with our BeCrop technology. Over the past decade, we have built the largest global database of soil, and with the help of AI and machine learning, we're now able to provide actionable insights and recommendations to the industry. So what makes us unique in our space is our work with different AgTech manufacturers, where we have tested and verified over 400 products and management practices. We have been working across 56 countries so far, analyzed over 200 crops, and proud to have impacted over 40,000 farmers globally. And in parallel, our BeCrop technology has been validated by the scientific community and published in 35 scientific journals. And like everyone on this call from the CPG world, we like to also publish our impact and measure and verify it, and we share that with the globe and the community, and hopefully, like most CPGs around the world, get others in this space to also do the same and think about the impact that they're having and ensuring that there's goals and KPIs set in place to meeting those impacts. So anyone that's interested in seeing what we have done at Biome Makers, please check us up on our website and take a look at our impact report that started publishing as of 2022. So gaining insights and being able to communicate with the soil is the first step in achieving our sustainability goals. There is so much soil can teach us and guide us on how to reduce our emissions, how to make improvements to soil fertility so that we can reduce the chemical usage and help us plan better for the future to, to help generations that we're expecting to have more resilient and healthier crops. And now that we know, soil biology is the key to achieving our sustainability goals, let me share how we do it at Biome Makers. We help communicate with soil, which has a lot to tell us. And by being able to communicate with the soil, we can then apply what it actually needs. So our process is we extract the DNA of the soil through our labs, we run it through our machine learning and AI platform, which is called BeCrop, and we transfer all that intelligence into a digital platform where we can easily understand how to improve the soil, get insights into recommendations, and a roadmap into how we can actually start meeting sustainability goals. And I wanted to start the discussion just with a quick, obviously overview about Biome Makers and how we look at soil health. And obviously, it all starts with you guys being on this call. As a lot of global companies are now looking into getting started, and we wanted to sort of put something together that would hopefully be helpful for you guys and hopefully lead you to a roadmap. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Apologies, I'm having a bit of a technical problem here. Okay, perfect. I think I've stopped sharing. And with that in mind, I wanted to get the conversation started by starting with our esteemed panelist here, Jacob Parnell, my colleague. If you don't mind giving us a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll get into the discussions about empowering brands to meet their sustainability goals.
Yeah, you bet. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
So I turned my camera on. I don't know if you can see me yet, but it might just be that delay. Okay. My name is Jacob Parnell. I received my PhD from Michigan State University from their Center for Microbial Ecology from the Crop and Soil Sciences Department. And from the get-go, it was always looking at organisms, soil organisms that basically are solving some of our problems. So initially I was working with bioremediation of toxic pollutants, but quite quickly got into more of a community approach. So I worked with Utah State University for a couple of years as a postdoc, and then joined on later as a faculty member. From there, I went and I joined the National Ecological Observatory Network in Boulder, Colorado, to design an observatory to basically test how microbial and terrestrial communities are adapting and helping to mitigate climate change and different land use practices. From there, I went and worked in industry for about 8 years with Novozymes. I was in charge of some of their discovery platforms for biological products for corn and for soybeans. And we took those projects all the way from using the microbiome of the corn or soybean, kind of the rhizosphere microbiome, to basically develop products that would help to at least somewhat replace some of the synthetic fertilizers to be able to move towards those nature-based solutions in agriculture. And from there, I started my first venture with Biome Makers. I was with Biome Makers for a little while before I had the opportunity to go and join the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in basically developing a global soil biodiversity observatory to try to figure out how do we look globally at soil biodiversity as a solution, as a way to be able to push for sustainability. And so that's, I was there, I helped them develop kind of this observatory, and now I am back with Biome Makers again. So that's kind of my career history there.
And we're very excited to have you back, Jacob. And more importantly, I'm excited to have you on this webinar and on this conversation as we're experiencing a true shift with the CPGs, starting global projects and initiatives that are going to help us become more sustainable. The most exciting part of all of this is the awareness around soil health and soil biology, which are the leading indicators for emission reductions and helping farmers become more productive and building resilient supply chains that will withstand climate change and feed the future generations that we're expecting. Starbucks is actually a great example. We're excited to partner with Starbucks and play a role in helping them achieve their sustainability goals. And hopefully we can share more on those in future webinars with you guys. It's interesting, Jacob, that there's this increasing number of government mandates and regulations around sustainability. And these regulations, from what we can see, is really encouraging or requiring CPG companies to address their environmental impact, reduce their carbon emissions, and adopt sustainable practices. So why do you feel there's a sudden urgency, this increased pressure, and for us to start supporting farmers and having plans to actually getting started with sustainability goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it goes back to one of the things that you said a little bit earlier, in that we are becoming aware of how important our soils are to us. And so, as we look at kind of the global issues that are happening right now, I mean, I can think the 3 Rio conventions of the United Nations. So there's the climate change, and recently the IPCC came out and basically said soils are the best answer. That's going to be the easiest way to start, mitigating climate change, is through agricultural soils. If we look at the desertification, another one of the Rio conventions, it's all about the drought and the loss of soils. And so right there, soils are front and center with both of those. The COP16 that's now concluding in Colombia this week is all about biodiversity. And we know that over half of the world's biodiversity is found in soils. And so if we look at kind of these big global issues, soil is the answer to every single one of those. And so I think the push to soils comes with that recognition that soils really play a huge role in all of this. And so I think a lot of the CPGs that are out there that are really forward thinking, you mentioned Starbucks, are already on that. So they're ahead of those regulations. They're looking for ways to say, we want to, be part of the solution and not necessarily have the government or governments of the world come and tell us what to do, but we want to be, ethically and just a player in this global market. And so for them, sustainability isn't a buzzword. It's basically their necessity. They're realizing that as climate change, as a lot of these things start to happen, sustainability is it's not just a nice thing to have. It's what's going to like you said, build that resilience in the supply chain. And so it becomes something that is key to their business, and not just kind of something that they can put on a billboard.
Absolutely, and it's, as these government mandates are coming, and you said some companies are at the forefront of that, and it's interesting how people are looking at sustainability and regenerative agriculture, for example, and they're sort of all, it seems like from what we're seeing with our clients at least, they're creating the goals that are very similar. And so these goals that we're seeing is, emission reductions, resiliency, and supporting farmers on their path to becoming more regenerative. And as a result of all of this, we're going to be producing better crops. And again, like I said earlier, withstand climate change. So because we're seeing sort of these three different themes within most of the sustainability goals, this is where we thought maybe we focus the conversation, because hopefully this will help audiences on this webinar to sort of think about if those are not the goals, and that's where they can sort of get started, or if they already have those goals, how would they tackle each of these? So let's break them down a little bit, and let's start with emission reductions. Improving soil health is obviously a powerful strategy that CPGs can look at to reduce their emissions, especially if they source agricultural raw materials. And healthy soil is critical in sequestering carbon, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously enhancing agricultural resiliency. So how are we helping companies, Biome Makers, reduce their emissions through the soil health and soil biology angle?
Yeah, so that all comes down to basically knowing, like you said, knowing the health of your soils. So in the past, what has happened is we know that certain crops need certain fertilizers, certain nutrients. And so in the past, what we've done is we've said, okay, if I can put X amount of fertilizer on my field, then I'm going to get, X amount of yield back from that. And so basically we've been trying to feed the plants this whole time and get that yield back without thinking about what they really need. And so it's always just kind of been a formula of, I'm just going to keep on putting that much amount of fertilizer on my field and get that much back, along with all of the not only the emissions that are associated with transporting all of those fertilizers, but also as we put fertilizers on the field, we're changing basically the release of emissions from the soil itself. And so now, one of the things that Biome Makers has done with our technology is we've kind of been able to open that box of biology to be able to say what's really going on in the field with the microorganisms that are either responsible for shifting kind of those pathways that make those nutrients available to the plants, or that are responsible for degrading organic matter into carbon that gets burned off back into the atmosphere. And so just the fact that we're able to look at that and we're able to measure that and be able to say, things like, actually you have a lot of nitrogen in your field, or in a way that's just not available, or phosphorus is probably a better example. You have a lot of phosphorus in your field, it's just not available to the plant. So instead of dumping more phosphorus on there, you can put a biological product that helps to basically release some of that phosphorus and make it available to the plants. And so we're doing two things. One is we're making the soil healthier, but we're also reducing the amount of chemicals that you have to bring in externally. And so that's just one of the key ways that we can do kind of reduce emissions. Another is that one of the things that we can look at is we can look at the ratio of basically carbon that's being fixed and put into the soil versus the carbon that's being released. So we kind of have this mass balance of carbon. So we're able to look at your practices, whether it's biological products, whether it's, I'm shifting to a no-till or other regenerative, whatever it is, we're looking at the biology and we're looking at the microorganisms, and we're able to say, this is how, that mass balance, this is how much that practice is contributing to really sequestering carbon into the soils.
Absolutely, and a question just came in, and I didn't want to wait until the end because I think it fits what we're talking about here. They're asking, do you know what baselines are and how to improve them? And I think there's a really great roadmap here that you can perhaps share.
Yeah, so as far as if you're talking about like for the regulations, for the government standards, there's not really a baseline right now. It's mostly just saying we're trying to, we know that what we're doing is damaging, and we're trying to pull it back as much as we can wherever we can. For Biome Makers, what we're able to do is we're able to, again, look at that mass balance, so to speak, or the pathways that we're looking at, because we're not really measuring carbon itself. We're measuring the microbes that are driving these processes. And so we're able to look at that, and we're able to say that you have more processes in your soil to keep the carbon there than you do have to get rid of it. And so in that sense, we're basically saying we have those processes to build carbon in the soils, and we're always looking for that to be kind of a positive, moving towards building. And the great thing about what we're able to do is that we're able to do it, there are practices out there where we can actually show that it's happening right away, that within a couple of weeks of adopting that practice, you have set up those processes so that the carbon is accumulating in the soils. And that's kind of been our baseline, is getting kind of that positive rather than that negative.
And what we're seeing with clients who are, or the CPGs who are running global trials with us right now, you're able to sort of get a baseline based on just your own supply chain, right? And see sort of the differences between each farmer. And I think, would that be sort of the baseline? At least you can start measuring within your own supply chain and getting a roadmap to how you can actually start improving, and what that improvement can look like, or how long that improvement may take based on the soil health and all the insights that we're getting?
Exactly. Yeah. So we could do an initial assessment where we just say, what does it look like right now? And we can look at that balance of not only carbon, but all of the other, the fertility and everything else that's going on in the soil. But if we just focus on carbon, we can look at kind of what is that balance of carbon pathways in the soil currently. And then as you start to adopt some of these sustainability practices, whether it's, the biologicals, whether it's, cover crops, whether it's no-till, whatever it is that you're going, we can continue measuring that, and we can start to say, these are the ones that are working best. These are the ones that are kind of shifting those pathways to encourage carbon input into the soil. And we're able to actually measure that almost in real time. And so I don't know if you were planning on going there, but currently a lot of the UN, for example, the decade of restoration, that's going to be over in 2030, and that's when a lot of companies had set their sustainability goals to be, we are going to be, I don't know if it's carbon neutral or half the carbon that we were producing by 2030. But the problem is we can't really measure soil carbon for about 3 to 5 years after we've implemented a practice. Just the way that we measure carbon is not precise enough to be able to give us anything for about 3 to 5 years. So if you're doing it wrong, you're starting something now, by the time you get to 2030, you will have found out that you didn't meet those goals. And it's that inflexibility often is kind of a pinch point. So one of the things that we're able to offer is we're able to say, okay, start your practice now. Within a couple of weeks to months, we're able to say, yes, you're heading in the right direction because we're measuring the processes. We're not measuring the carbon itself, we're measuring the processes that actually build that carbon in the soil. And so then you can start to say, oh, it's working over here, but it's not working over here. Let's change our practices in this geographical region or in these soils, and let's see if we can fine tune it to get something better, so that by the time we do get to 2030, then we're so much further ahead because of that added flexibility.
Absolutely. So giving yourself a lot more time, as it does take time for you to see those improvements.
Well, and not just time, but it says, because right now you can say, yes, we are implementing sustainability, but we won't really know if we're implementing sustainability or at least carbon neutrality for 5 years, right? Where if you're able to use something like this, you're able to say, yes, we are implementing it, we are validating it, that it is actually happening, that those processes are everything is set up and we're tracking it. We are kind of being kind of the more of a steward rather than just saying, yes, we can put that stamp and saying we're sustainable.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift it a little bit. I think instead of going to a second point, which was resiliency, I think this really leads well into how farmers can do better. How do we encourage farmers to, or how do we not encourage, but support them towards this regenerative route? And obviously, if we're looking to reduce our carbon emissions, carbon sequestration, all of that great stuff, we need the help of the farmers. How do we support them? Are there examples that you can provide, changes that we can help with farmers that can perhaps move this needle forward?
Absolutely. Now you're getting me all excited, Sarah, because now I can talk about. So one of the biggest issues with farmers is they do feel like that. Well, first of all, they feel like they're blamed for everything, right? So in the past, anytime we talk about issues with soil degradation, it's always the farmer's fault. It's always the farmer's fault, and so they're kind of at the end getting all the blame. And the opportunity now is to look at the farmers as the solution, to be able to say, look, soils are so important that we really need to be supporting our farmers with the information that they need to understand. And so one of the things that we have now is a new approach called BeCrop Farm. And that's where we can go to a farmer, we can collect soil samples, and we can actually then say, look, here are the practices, or here are the products that would be best for your field. So in the past, a lot of companies will go and will basically say, well, your nitrogen pathways aren't working the way they should, and just kind of leave it at that, which is great information for the farmer, but then they're kind of stuck saying, so what do I do about that? And so now we've gotten to the point where we can actually couple those with tests that we've done, and we're doing more and more of these tests with different biological products, different practices, different things, to be able to say what really works in this type of a soil. And so then basically the farmer can get this readout of saying, these are the pathways that aren't working very well biologically in your field, and we have found that these solutions will work, and so you can implement this practice, or you can put on this product, or and so it's basically kind of unlocking the biology of a farmer's field so that they can really start to work with the biology and get the biology to work with them. And so that's kind of a solution on the farm scale, but the cool thing is that it doesn't have to be just at a farm scale. So this can be at a regional scale. So you could do this at a number of different farms. For example, in in a supply chain. If you've got a number of farms, say in California, you don't have to stick with this one farm. You can say, well, let's do all of the farms, in this larger area, and let's look at all of the practices that we can implement across all of these farms.
Absolutely, and I think the beauty of what we offer at Biome Makers is that we're brand agnostic. So we help farmers apply what their fields and soil needs by not providing an actual brand that may not be available to them, or it's not something that they want to try. We give them advice on the products we have tested, but the actual formulations of those products. Is that correct, Jacob? Is there anything else we would want to add there?
Yeah, and so we're not trying to push anything. We're trying to push information. We're trying to say, push that same sustainability, the same. So we don't have an agenda to come and say, look, we're going to try and sell you product X because we've got, that's going to help us out in some way. We're just saying what's going to help the farmer out, what's going to help, with the biology of that field the most. And so any product that we've tested, if we've found that it works, it's going to be in there. Or any practice that if we've found works, it's going to be in there. And so we don't have any kind of incentive to push one product or one practice over another.
Yeah, our goal is to make sure the farmer, one, gets insight into their soil health, two, applies what it actually needs and where it needs it, but that's also important, and try and reduce as much chemical and fertilizer as much as possible so that they can build more resilient soil that can withstand a lot of the climate change. And this really helps farmers from what we see through all the case studies we've done, all the companies we've worked with that have run major projects across the world with different farmers. We see that this saves them money, right? It helps them grow better quality crops. And as a result, be able to partner with you guys on the CPG, corporate side to help you meet those goals that you have set out to achieve. Which leads us to sort of the next part of our conversation, which is around resiliency. How do companies and these major CPGs that work with farmers ensure that they do have a resilient supply chain? How do they evaluate that?
Yeah, so in the past, normally what you've been able to do as a CPG is you've been able to say, I'm gonna basically spread out my supply chain so that if one area of the United States gets hit by a hurricane, then I'm gonna have other areas that will not be affected, and so I will still have that supply chain. I will still have the materials. It might be a little bit. I guess it'll be impacted, but it won't be a total loss. And so that's kind of been the strategy in the past, is just by geographic location. But with climate change, with land use, with all of the other things that are going on, we're starting to see that more and more areas are becoming impacted. And so we need to shift away from the geography thing is still a good idea, but we need to start focusing on making each farmer's field more resilient rather than the whole supply chain. So by making each farmer's field more resilient, you're making the entire supply chain more resilient as well. And that all comes through focusing on the soil health. A lot of the issues with the chemical synthetic fertilizers is they're feeding the plant. And so you're making a healthy plant, but you're basically killing the soil while you do it. And so we need to shift away from synthetic fertilizers to biological, to more, of the agroecology type of approaches, so that we're actually feeding the soil instead. Because if we feed the soil, then the soils are going to be more resilient, and that makes the plants more resilient. Having a higher carbon content in your soil means that the soils can hang on to water a lot better in drought conditions. And so if you have a field that has high organic content next to a field that has low organic content. The field with low organic content in a drought is just going to be decimated. That resilience is gone. But the field with the high organic content will be able to hang on for a lot longer with that current water holding capacity. And so that's just one example of how building soils and building the biology in soils leads to kind of that resilience on an individual farm scale. And so that happens with abiotic and biotic stress as well. So disease is impacted by it as well. If you've got that healthier system, you're having a healthier cycling of nutrients, and so you don't need to apply fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers that can, and so it just builds so much more of a resilient system. So instead of looking at the whole system as, okay, I don't care if these farms get lost because I've got these other ones, you're looking at, I don't want any of the farms to get lost. I want to build resilience everywhere rather than just in kind of from a systemic level. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And this may sound a bit complicated, or attendees attending this webinar may be thinking about, like, how would I measure this or look at this on a global scale? And we do have an indicator where we look at the sustainability of each farmer that can sort of show you at least a map into how resilient your farm is. Our BeCrop Rate, is that something you want to touch on a little bit, Jacob?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so our whole goal at Biome Makers is to take something as complicated as biology and try to make it as simple as possible for farmers to understand, for manufacturers of these biological products to understand, for CPGs to understand. And so we've developed indices that take these complex models and formulas and put it into one easy to read score, so that you can actually compare, field A to field B and say which one has a higher resilience. And you're able to look at that, or you're able to look at the same field and say, okay, I want to apply, a practice, or I want to apply, shift away from synthetic fertilizers to a biological approach, and I want to see if that impacts that resilience, and we can actually track that. We can show that score, that resilience score, that biosustainability scores, those shift as we shift to more sustainable practices, which is basically how you can go through and you can actually do a reporting. You can say, last year our biosustainability score across all of our supply chains, averaged this, and we implemented these practices. We measured it the next year, and we saw this much increase in our biosustainability score that actually has something tied to it. It ties it back to the biology of those soils. And so you can actually report that and have actual numbers where you're saying, this is, we increased by X% our biosustainability.
And in a lot of our cases with our clients, they like to really compare how their supply chain is within other countries or even crops. If your supply chain, or you're just sourcing coffee, you want to see how you are sort of comparing to perhaps other crops. If your supply chain's in Colombia and you want to compare with Peru, you're able to see where you stand, and you're doing good. If you're not doing so good, how you can start making some major changes, and at least be able to have, I think, that baseline, as some of the attendees are asking, gaining those insights, I think is quite valuable, as it really does help you get a sense of where you stand today and how you can improve.
Yeah, or even look and say, okay, I'm trying practice A over here and practice B over here. Which one is better? Which one is building more resilience and more sustainability? Because I do want to have that best carbon neutrality by 2030 or 2050, whatever that goal is. And so you're able to say, okay, this option is better, so let's immediately start shifting everything in the direction that's working best for building that soil.
Absolutely. We're getting a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and jump into some of these questions just to make sure we try and answer as much as we possibly can, and then dive back into the conversation if the time permits. But a question has come in: what quality of these solubilizing organisms do you actually need to see a difference in your NPK usability for your plants?
So if I understand right, the question is basically, if we are measuring the microbes, how does that translate over to the plants being able to uptake these nutrients? And we found that that's actually it's very similar. So one of the things that we measure, so we're not only measuring the processes for like phosphate solubility. So these are the organisms that are solubilizing phosphates, making it available to the plant, but we're also looking at, well, what about the organisms that then try to compete for that phosphorus, that soluble phosphorus that's in there, that's competing with the plant. So we're able to look at those similar to what I kind of explained with those carbon dynamics of being able to say, do we have, more that are releasing the phosphorus to make it available for the plant, or do we have more that are consuming phosphorus that are basically depleting the phosphorus that's already soluble so that the plant doesn't have it? So we've been able to fine tune this, and through actual analysis of plant materials, we're able to find that the indexes that we provide are actually very closely related to what the plants are able to experience and what they're able to take up.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. Thank you, Jacob. Another question has come in: what tends to be the first indicator of soil that is improving? Love that question.
So that, I guess that depends on how you're measuring it. So for us, we're able to measure it almost immediately. So within 1 or 2 weeks, we can actually go out and we can actually see differences in the soil when we're measuring the processes. So the processes are basically the first thing that we're able to measure. So these changes in the microbial community, changes in the microorganisms that are contributing to soil organic matter, that are contributing to fixing the carbon, those are the first things we're able to see. Again, it takes a long time to be able to see, if we're measuring the carbon itself, it takes a long time to be able to see that accumulation of the carbon, just because it is a long process.
And this leads to another question that's actually carbon related. How are you able to determine how much carbon you're sequestering or GHG you're reducing by implementing biological practices? And how much is this actually going to reduce your emissions by?
Yeah, this is a great question. And so this is something that we're currently working on, because what we're doing now is we're measuring all these processes. So we're able to say, you've got so much abundance of these organisms that are fixing carbon and this other abundance of microorganisms that are basically degrading the carbon. And so we have the processes that, again, we can't really measure that until we get, a couple of years down the road. So we're currently in the process of looking at some of these. We have looked at some in the past where we look at past practices, and we're able to say, this is what kind of that carbon balance is now, and this is what we're seeing as far as accumulation of carbon in the soils. So we're currently working on measuring some of that. Now, as far as the emissions, we're actually able to measure that almost immediately as well. So because the emissions, again, are part of that process. So for example, if you're looking at methane emissions, or if you're looking at CO2 emissions from the soil, those can be measured fairly quickly and almost immediately.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we could have an entire session on carbon. But there's more carbon questions coming in. The next one is the carbon emissions from the soil are more effective in a soil with low humidity when increased temperature with climate change. When increased with temperature and climate change, how do you proceed?
I'm sorry, can you read the question again?
I believe it's a statement and a question. The carbon emissions from the soil are more effective. Are they more effective in a soil with low humidity when increased temperature, when there's increased temperature with climate change? So I'm guessing if the question's around if the carbon emissions are affected by low humidity or changes in temperature. And if that's the case, how do we proceed?
So yeah, so the great thing about what we're doing is we are looking again at the processes. So for example, you know, if you're talking about climate change that is reducing humidity and is increasing temperature, we're not the ones that are trying to necessarily solve that. We're the ones that are trying to say what is the best solution. So if I'm understanding the question right. So in other words, we would be able to look at that soil and we would be able to say, okay, under, you know, increased humidity or, you know, decreased humidity, whatever it is, what products, what practices can help us retain more, you know, the soil organic carbon or build soil organic carbon, what products, what, and so we're there to just show you kind of the measurement of those processes almost in real time, where we're able to say this is what's happening to the system. And so whether it's a practice, whether it's a product, whether it's, you know, a different crop type, whatever it is, we're able to actually measure the processes associated with the microorganisms in the soil as that's occurring. And so we're not necessarily saying that measuring the soil is going to improve the soil. We're saying that by measuring the soil, we can figure out what products or practices are best at improving the soil.
Amazing. Interesting question that's come in. Where do you see the most efficient area to set protocols for growers contracted to the food manufacturers? Is it the retailers or is it at the grower level? Is it a partnership with food manufacturers that set the protocol for retailers and help growers? What I think is the question is, what's the most efficient to set these protocols?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And either it shows that we have a really hard time making decisions, or else basically our approach has been all of the above. So right now our approach is saying farmers should have access to this information. So farmers should have access to like this BeCrop farm, to be able to look at it and say, the best thing that I can add to my field right now is this product. So they should be able to have access to the biology. The manufacturers and retailers should have access to biology. They should be able to say, why does my biological product work over here and it doesn't work over here? Or maybe even better to say, I shouldn't be trying to sell my product where I have now found out that it doesn't really work. I should focus on selling it where I've been able to show with Biome Makers that it does work over here. And that maybe as my product starts to work better and we have more confidence around it, my product can actually be in that list of recommendations for farmers. And so I want to be part of this data sharing where, you know, my product is tested and is almost like certified by Biome Makers to be able to go out into the field. And then, you know, all the way up to you know, retailers that are basically in between the two, that say, okay, I have a farmer here, I've got a list of products, and they can say, if I test this farmer's field, I can figure out from my list of products what is the best thing to apply to this grower's field. At the food, you know, the CPG level, you're able to say, well, why don't we do this for all of our fields? So that instead of doing a blanket thing that, yeah, is going to work in some places and maybe not in others, we can say, well, over here, this is the recommended practice that we need to do. And in this other region, this other area, climate, whatever it is, soil type, we need to do something a little bit different. And we have recommendations for each one of those that is actually going to get the most out of each one of those fields. So it's very tailored, almost kind of a precision type of approach to building carbon. So I'm afraid that the answer is all of them.
And depending on what you're looking for.
Exactly, exactly.
Question, is crop nutritional value delivered to the customer, measured value through Biome Makers technology?
Not directly. So we don't measure the nutritional value of the crop, but we know that by building healthier soils, it's been shown in so many studies that by building a healthier ecosystem of soil, you get more nutritious crops. So the protein content of the seed or the crop is higher, the sugar content. So everything basically is a higher quality product if you've got a healthier soil. And so by making the healthier soil, which we measure directly, you can get a healthier, higher quality product out of the food, which we don't really measure.
Great, thank you. Do you think soil tests on top of your testing would be more beneficial for the customers? And I'm guessing they're speaking to perhaps chemical testing on top of biological.
Yeah, that's another great question, and it's one that we do quite frequently. We've actually partnered with quite a few, labs, different groups. I believe this is the approach that some of our larger clients are taking, is they want to look at both. And one of the reasons is because in doing a traditional soil test, they're able to say this is how much nitrogen is out in your field. And then by coupling with, or let's say phosphorus again, this is how much phosphorus is out in your field. And then by coupling it with our product, where we say there's a lot of phosphorus, but it's not moving. And so then they can say, well, instead of putting on more phosphorus, then what I can do is I can put on a phosphorus solubilizer, and it's going to make the phosphorus that's already there more available. And so I think it's a good idea to use both approaches, to use the chemical test as well as the biological test. But again, it goes back to what are you looking at? If you're looking at soil fertility, then definitely that's the way to go. If you're looking for carbon dynamics, I would start with the biological testing, get these processes in the right place, and then after several years, then you can really start to say, well, I wouldn't expect to see an increase in soil organic carbon before 2 or 3 years anyway. And so then you'd measure it those 2 or 3 years.
Thanks, Jacob. Another question that's come in is about past customers that we have worked with. And if we could share a quick case study and some of the deliverables. This is all available on our website as well. We have tons of case studies where we share real life examples from our customers. And I think it's always useful to refer to those and see how they sort of got started and what the outcomes were like. And a lot of these projects are proceeding to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th year. So you can sort of see the evolution of those projects, of where they were and where they are today. But I think one that I could mention is Ecom, who a lot of folks will know as they are a global company. And we worked with, I believe, 100, we started the project a couple of years ago with 100 of their Costa Rican coffee growers. and we enrolled them to basically understand where they are at in terms of their sustainability, and help them measure and enhance their practices. So they sort of had a twofold to the project where they're helping each of these farmers become more sustainable by providing them with the right sort of recommendations and insights. And from a corporate perspective, they're able to get a sense of how each of these farmers compare within their supply chain, how they compare with the rest of Costa Rica, and then how they compare with the rest of coffee growers around the world. And they sort of started as a baseline, and now they're able to continuously work with us and work with their farmers to see where that baseline, where that line is now going. And we are able to basically, I think the project deliverables that we provided them were obviously insights to reducing Scope 3 emissions, intelligence into their supply chain, benchmarking reports, agronomic insights to help them increase the quality of their coffee and productivity, because obviously that's always top of mind, and you know, it's a goal for a lot of farmers, but obviously in this case they want to ensure that the quality and the productivity was high. We created API connections that were able to help them connect to the data points, because obviously there's so much data that we look at Biome Makers, but we try and simplify that data through our digital platforms, and then obviously create that API connection so that our customers also have access to that data, and they're able to do their own analysis as well if they so wish to. And then obviously providing transparency and communication in their sustainability efforts. So there's a lot more that you guys can definitely look into and check out on our website. I know there's, you know, obviously as we've shared, soil is very complex. Building sustainability projects, thinking about the goals and KPIs and how to measure and how to meet the goals that you have is, again, very complex at times. And we really take the onus on working with our clients, helping them paint a roadmap that we think we can definitely help in driving value and helping them, you know, achieve those goals with the lens of soil biology. So if you guys have any, you know, interest in learning more, you want to do a deeper dive into anything we've discussed today, please reach out to us. You can visit us on our website at biomakers.com, and we'd be more than happy to connect with you, provide you with demos or case studies, or just meet with you and brainstorm about your sustainability projects that you have coming up. I know we're coming right at the end of our webinar. I want to thank you, Jacob, for being here today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. This webinar is again recorded, and we'll send you a recording via email within the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jacob, for being here.
Thank you, and thank everybody for their questions and participation. Appreciate it.
Have a good day, everyone.